Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Christy Godwin. Welcome to my podcast, Spiritual Talk with Christy Godwin and Friends. And I am so thankful to have Shelley Heidebrink here. Thank you so much for being here today, Shelley.
Sure.
She is here to talk about a very delicate subject, and I'm so impressed with her bravery of coming forward and talking about it. And it's the loss of her son. And as a psychic medium, I can tell you that losses are hard. But there's a special pain that comes with losing a child. It's out of order. Yes, it's hurtful when we lose a spouse or a parent, but it's more in the order of things than when we lose a child. There's just a special pain that comes with that. And so, Shelley, would you feel comfortable telling us a little bit, just an overview of your loss, how it happened?
Sure. So like you said, it was my son, Lawson, and he was 22. He had special needs. He brought so much joy to our lives, but definitely had his own challenges here on earth. He had gotten sick back in 2021 with symptoms that seemed like COVID. We all had done everything we could to try to protect from that, but actually when he got sick, we thought for sure that's what he had. He ended up testing negative for COVID multiple times. And he ended up in the ICU. He spent 10 days in the ICU on a ventilator and other machines keeping him alive. And after 10 days with no improvement, he passed away. So 1 month after his 22nd birthday. He did not have COVID. What they ended up saying is that it was aspiration pneumonia, which is very common in people who suffer from acid reflux. So sometime prior to him getting sick, he had aspirated on his own acid and it went into his lungs and it caused pneumonia, and he ended up not being able to come back from that.
I'm so sorry for your loss. And I do want to mention to everyone here, and this is actually something that Shelley wasn't where I was going to bring up, but it just came to me as you were talking. I was thinking back to our original meeting now, which has been quite some time. And I do remember because Lawson was on a ventilator and y'all had to make the horrendous decision of whether or not to keep him on it longer or to take him off of it. I didn't realize that the first time we enrolled into the reading. I'm describing him. I could see him on the ventilator. And I said to you, he says it's okay. And he was acknowledging that he didn't want to stay on this earth if he couldn't be the way he was before, which was silly and vibrant and dancing and doing all the crazy things that Lawson did. And you had a reading with someone before that had said something that was extremely detrimental, I felt like, to your recovery.
For sure. My husband and I had actually taken a trip to Branson. And part of that trip, I had booked a psychic medium reading. I was like, let's just go see what this is about. And during the time, I couldn't do it. Like when we actually were going to go face to face, I couldn't do it. And she's like, oh, it's fine. And instead of returning my money, she was like, you can do it via Zoom. So on our wedding anniversary, I prepared a special dinner. And then we did this Zoom meeting with this psychic who honestly, I'd never done it before, so I didn't know what to expect. But her story of Lawson's passing actually brought me very traumatic experiences. She had said that he had struggled and he really hadn't made it to his final destination, that he was still trying to come back to Earth every day, and that he was looking for his mom.
I want to thank you. I'm sorry to bring up such a painful memory, but I want to address to anyone watching that as a psychic medium, you really want to make sure you're going to someone who has some integrity. And Shelley and I were just laughing before this. She said she was looking, because every time we meet, I always tell her something that what they were recently talking about in their house. And that's what she's looking for, is something that people can tell her that you can't get by Googling your name. And those psychic mediums don't have time to Google your name. I understand the concept. Also, everyone, and I want everyone listening to understand, I have gone looking in heaven to the other side for tens of thousands of spirits, and I found them all, and they were all at peace, and they're all very happy being in heaven. And I have gone looking for beautiful, beautiful souls like Lawson, and I have gone looking for people who didn't make great decisions on this earth, and they were all over there. So for anyone listening, I want you to know that your loved one is surrounded by the unconditional love of the God vibration, and they are not trying to fight to come back to this earth. They are not lost. they go home. We all go home, and home is heaven. So thank you for talking about that, Shelley. I just didn't want anyone else to be listening to this and someone had gotten news that is going to set them back in their grief. Now, can you tell me something about in the early moments of your grief, what you wish you had known that would have made you see things a little bit clearer?
I think that if I had known, I'm 2 years in now, and if I had known in the very beginning that my grief is my journey and it's okay to take it at my speed, and it's not a straight path. Like you don't just get through stage one and then you're on stage two and then you're on stage three. Like you might hit stage one today and you might be stage five tomorrow and you might be back at stage one the next day. And it's okay. Like as a parent, as a sibling, as a grandparent, like we all grieve differently. Our memories treat us differently in grief and our own abilities to process information and how we do that. So just knowing that your grief is personal and it's yours and you own it. And even if you didn't want it, even if it's this life we didn't ask for, don't let anybody else tell you that this is how you have to grieve, that there are 5 stages and you go from 1 to 5. And when you're done, you're over it, because that doesn't happen.
Thank you. Very well said, Shelley. Thank you. Thank you. And I can attest, I have seen that many, many times. And you can be, months of feeling good. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you have a memory, you have a smell. You look at the calendar and it's a day that just brings all that grief flooding back. Thank you. Thank you, Shelley, for pointing that out. What would you say surprised you the most about your grief?
Society,
Mm.
like whether it be family, friends, coworkers, jobs, or just society in general, their lack of ability to be compassionate or to understand that grief doesn't have a timeline.
Yeah.
And at the same time, society, in the fact that I have found more comfort in strangers sometimes that have presented themselves in my life for whatever reason, whether it be a gentleman at the cemetery who has admired how I memorialized my son's headstone, or someone at the grocery store who saw the sticker on the back of my car, or even encountering you on Facebook Live.
That is so true that sometimes it's the people that are closest to us who we think we're going to get the most support from, and that's not the ones that step up. It's those beautiful angels walking around that we don't even realize that they are angels. And Shelley did apparently, after the original psychic medium reading, she had sworn off psychics, which I don't really blame her. And she had seen me on, like, no, did you just come across my live or did someone send you there?
So no, I had kind of like just creeped Facebook for other psychic mediums, and I was just following you. Like, but I was following you from a very far distance. Like I was not like, if I could have been anonymous, I would have been.
And so what Shelley is referencing, I will go live on TikTok, Facebook, according to where I'm live for the day or that week. And I was live on Facebook and I don't remember it, but she was telling me about it the other day. Apparently had brought up her son. I'd even said his name and you weren't,
Yeah, you were like, his name like starts with an L. It's either lawyer or Larson. And I'm still over here going, yeah, not mine. It's not mine, you know? And people are like typing in the comments, was it Willie? Is it my William? And I'm like, clearly she just said it starts with an L, people. Like,
So now what did I say that made you think, yes, that's my Lawson?
so you had originally, like I said, you had said something about like a motorized vehicle or something. And I was like, yeah, no, that wouldn't be him. And then you started talking about other things and started saying his name. And so then I finally just typed, that's all I said in the comment was Lawson. And you were like, yes, that's it. We are with Shelley on this one. Because someone else had asked about like reading their grandmother. And you were like, yeah, we can do that. But I've got a spirit that's pushing through and I need to try to connect him with whoever he's looking for. Because he's a boy, and you're like, oh, he's telling me he's a young man, he is not a boy. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is so him. Like, I'm a man, like,
Right.
so yeah.
I
But
can
yeah,
see that happening too, because once you read a spirit enough, you get to know their personalities. And I do call them boys because I have kids that, older than him. And so of course I'm gonna call I do. Even now, he's like, I'm a man. I'm a man.
And the other thing that you said that was like, you had mentioned, yeah, Lawson's telling you that I go to the cemetery every day. And at that time, I had not missed a day. And I was like, that's not something you can get from Google. Like, nobody else knows I go there. Half the time, my husband doesn't know I'm there. So for you to be like, he's telling me that you go every day and it's okay for you to take a break and not go, like, he's not there.
Oh, very good.
So yeah, there were just things
Yes.
that,
So for people watching this, I do require my spirits to step up and tell me things that there's no way I would know. There's no way. And it's double proof. It's proof that they are around you. And it's also proof that I have your spirit. And Lawson has now come to me many times. He visits me all the time.
invited or uninvited.
Yes, I'll take him. I'll take him. Now, in what ways was it harder than you thought it was going to be? Was there any aspect of the grief that was harder than you thought it would be?
I think kind of touching on the same thing I said before, just the lack of support from family and friends. I think that when we suffer such a catastrophic loss that was so big in our life, losing a child is hard, period.
Yeah.
Any parent who's lost a child, whether that's before they've even come in this world, whether it's pregnancy loss, whether it's infant loss, whether it's adult loss. But I think for me, I really struggled with the fact that we had cared for him every day. He was 22, but he lived at home and he required our care. So finding support that was specialized for
Mm.
our loss, like that it was caregiver loss, it was parent loss, it was loss of our entire family who had always come together for his needs. And we had spent our whole life planning for his success and for his journey. So lack of support from family, lack of understanding from family, things that they said, like they thought we should be able to move on from.
Mm.
Um, it was hard. It was hard for me to realize that as much as it affected me, it didn't affect everybody that way.
And I think what you said just then was so beautiful. And I don't understand how people could expect parents to ever move on. Like, yes, you can move on through life, but you never leave your grief behind.
No,
It it changes who you are at a soul level when you lose a child.
for sure.
And also something that you mentioned to me the other day, Shelley, that I want to bring up today because I had to sit for a moment and process what you said that I'm having a hard time even regurgitating the words because they had said that maybe you should be grateful because your burden was lifted. So because y'all took care of Lawson every day of your life and he required round the clock care, they insinuated that he was a burden to you.
Right? And that we should go on with our lives because our burden had been lifted. It was 3 weeks after my son's funeral. And that was the advice we got from family that I can't believe you guys aren't doing better. I can't believe you're not living your life. Like your burden is gone. Like you should be able to live your life. And I had to explain to them that he was my life. He was not my burden. And now I don't get to live my life. Taking care of him, I got to take care of him. That was a privilege. That was an honor to be his mom. He was my whole life. So he wasn't a burden.
So let's just make that as the number one thing you should never say to someone.
Right.
Their loved one as not a burden. Their loved
And the
one.
next thing, yeah, the thing right behind that is I can't imagine what you're going through. Well, you don't have to. I'm sitting right here. Ask me about it.
Mhm.
Don't tell me you can't imagine because you don't have to imagine it. I can tell you what I'm going through. If
So
you just took the time to listen.
that rolls into my next question is what was the most meaningful thing done for you during your grieving?
Um, I think honestly, people showing up, like the ones who did show up. Some of Lawson's staff that had worked with him in our home for some of them only months and some of them for years. Um, Sharing memories, like reaching out, like we had a staff member who said, I don't even know what to say to you, but I think about him all the time. But I don't want to make your grief worse. I don't want to text you something and you're having a good day. And so we just agreed that when we are both thinking of him and we want the other person to know, we'll just send emojis. Like we don't send words. We might send a random rainbow or a red balloon or a taco. I mean, like It's just like things that Lawson really enjoyed that we're remembering or thinking about in that moment. And we'll just send emojis. So just other people saying his name, other people remembering that he was here. Like that, yes, it's sad that he's gone, but the joy comes from other people sharing their memories. Memories I don't have. Because going forward right now, I can't make new memories with Lawson. But when
Right.
someone shares their memory that I didn't know about, that's a new memory to me of my son.
I love that, Shelley. I actually never thought about that.
So if you can share a video or a picture or a story that I don't have, that's how I get new memories of my own child who's been gone for 2 years.
That's beautiful. I absolutely love that. Number one thing you should do, share those memories. And I always wonder, and I've never had a parent tell me that they don't want someone messaging them because they were having a good day and the fact that someone brought up their child made their day bad. I've
Right.
never had someone say that. Parents are always thinking about their children and they always want to know if you are thinking about them. And just because a parent has not spoken about their child that has passed, I guarantee you they're thinking about them. And if,
Sometimes I think we get to the point where we feel like other people don't want to hear about it.
yeah,
Conversations get awkward when you start talking about openly about your grief or about your loss or even your memories. Conversations get awkward because people don't know how, society does not know how to normalize grief.
you are right. I talk about, of course, grief is my business. And so
Right.
I think a lot about that we don't know how to talk about grief. And so then we tend to back away and almost ostracize the people that are experiencing grief because of our uncomfortableness and our awkwardness. And then it leaves them feeling very unsupported. Now, this also rolls into what my next question for you. What's the one thing you wish people would ask you, even today?
Um, I think just ask about him, ask about us, like just openly, like, what's your journey like? Like, where are you at in your journey? Like, how do you honor him? How do you remember him? What's your favorite memory? Whether it's individualized, like as far as like, oh, it's Christmas, like tell me about your favorite Christmas memory with Lawson. Or the other thing that I have found super helpful is I have a friend who lost a husband very shortly after Lawson passed away. And she'll ask me about my grief journey because she looks up to me on that. Like she's like, you gave me so much information in the very beginning. So knowing that while it's not a life I chose and it's not a decision that I made to live my life this way, that the experience that I've gone through can help others.
Absolutely. Yes. And I have encouraged Shelley to, probably not right now, but I'm sure soon she will start some kind of support because the difference I see in you now and then when I originally met you, which was, not long after, probably 6 months after Lawson passed or something like that.
Close to a year. It was right before his birthday. So it was probably 10 months after Lawson passed away. Mhm.
Okay. And and grief changes you. And that's something people don't realize the depth in which it changes you. When I say it changes you at a soul level, I am not exaggerating. It changes every aspect of your life and every aspect of your DNA of how you function on this earth, especially when you lose a child. So now, have you found it hard to, because your mom,
Right.
you are grieving Lawson as mom. Is it hard to watch other people grieve him in other ways, or do you always just honor however people are grieving him?
I am happy if someone's grieving him because it tells me that I'm not alone, that my love for him is not the only love he had. That while mine is the only mom love, there's no
Right.
other mom to him. And I'm the only one who's going to feel the loss that I feel at the catastrophic level that it is to me. Um, for someone to, whether they're crying or having a great memory of him or, sharing a story or so many people say Lawson changed their lives. One of his caregivers actually had written a letter for his memorial service, and she said, I did not realize how bad I needed him when I took this job. He did
Mm.
not need me. I was brought here because I needed him. And in that, her story is that even Lawson, with his disabilities and the challenges he had in life, he was always happy. He was the happiest kid around, and he was boisterous. He was loud. And you knew that he was happy. And so for her, her story was that she could see that even with his challenges, she had none of those challenges and she wasn't happy in her life. Like, there's a story there. Like,
Mhm.
so I'm happy if people are letting me know that they also miss him, that they grieve him, that it was a loss for them. So it
You
doesn't
know,
matter to me how they do it.
as you were talking, I was thinking back. Actually, of course, we're talking about Lawson. So, of course, Lawson's going to appear. And he was reminding me. So, he gave me a memory that he loves since he's been gone. And Shelley's going to laugh when I tell her about this memory because she laughed when it happened the first time. So, I had a reading with Shelley, and we had been talking about a lot of other things because you had multiple readings with me. And this was it was a different kind of reading, not really focused on Lawson. And then you messaged me later. It's like, oh my goodness, I feel so bad. I didn't, you were celebrating his birthday coming up, and you had not asked me what Lawson wanted to see happen. Now, frankly, I was having some health concerns. I was headed out of the country for um, some medical treatment. I read her email, but didn't respond. It wasn't like I wasn't going to respond. I just didn't at that moment because I didn't have the mental capacity. So now I'm in another country on the other side of the world, and I'm getting out of the shower there, and I caught a spirit out of the corner of my eye. And I looked, I was like, Lawson, what are you doing here? So now, mind you, I'm on the other side of the world, getting out of the shower, and there her son appears to me. I was like, what are you doing here? And he shows me pizza and bowling. So then I was like, why are you showing? And then I remembered the email from Shelley. So then I'm feeling crazy and I'm messaging her. I was like, Shelley, I know this sounds crazy, but Lawson just appeared to me and he's showing me pizza and bowling. Did he like bowling? And then what was your response to that?
Yeah, the funnier part about that was one more thing to that is that I had sent you that email knowing that you were going into treatment, and I couldn't even ask. Like, I was feeling selfish, but I had beat myself up for whatever it was, 7 or 8 days before you responded. And I had gotten really quiet because in the very beginning of that session with you, he had appeared and talked about the special date. Like, he wanted us to celebrate his birthday. Then we got rolled off into other stuff, and we never said how. Like, he wants us to celebrate, but not how. So yeah, so my response to that was yes. So we used to own a bowling alley. So Lawson grew up with bowling all the time, and pizza was his favorite food. And the other piece of that was balloons. So there was
Oh, yeah,
bowling
yeah,
and
yeah.
pizza and balloons. And I'm like, well, of
With
course,
balloons.
because Lawson would never do a birthday without balloons.
So what's so beautiful that even after what I love about this is, and Lawson is so good about every time you have a reading with me, he comes up with new material because we just had a reading the other day. And I was asking him, as Lawson, don't you ever, not come up with new material? And he's like, nope, he's always around Shelley, always coming up with new material, always telling me things that I didn't know. And he's continuing to create memories for you even from the other side, which I think is beautiful. It says so much about his heart. And you're right. Whenever I, as a medium, I read spirits, I will go through some of the emotional components that they had on the earth, like, when they were sad or something they did they regretted. And you're right that Lawson is always just happy. Like, every memory he has is happy. Well, he might have, every once in a while he'll show me something that he would get frustrated with while he was on Earth, but it's not like he was ever angry or mad. He was just frustrated with something going on or someone not understanding him. He was just a ball of joy. Now, what
Lack of
resource?
communication, his inability to communicate made him
Yeah,
frustrated. Mhm.
it did. Um, but even that, he wasn't angry. He would just get frustrated. It's like when you are talking to a toddler and they're saying the same thing and you're like, honey, I'm just not understanding you, and they're just really ticked off because in their head they're saying exactly what you should understand. Now, what resources have you found most encouraging or helpful on your grief journey?
Well, I think that's an important piece, is to not allow other people to dictate your journey. So I am an avid reader. I read a lot of a lot of things online about the early stages of grief. I don't necessarily recommend ordering 10 books like I did the day after the funeral, because let me tell you, you don't really read them. Um, but I did. I have like a couple different resources that one of them was a journal called How to Carry What Can't Be Fixed. So that was really helpful. I have gone online and found resources. There's a community called Tender Hearts. It's with David Kessler, who is a world-renowned grief expert. He does some webinars and stuff that you can sign up for. But just educating myself. I personally do therapy. I did crisis therapy right after it happened, and then I found a therapist that I work with weekly. Still, 2 years later, I do it every week, and I belong to a bereaved parents group, so it's that's the one I found when I was really struggling with, I need something specialized for parents of special needs children. I need people who understand, not that just I lost my child, but that I literally gave my whole life to him and I don't have a life without him. So that is through actually the University of Minnesota. It's so it was recommended to me. So it's for medically complex children, basically people who've lost a medically complex child, and that's their focus. It's remote. So one of the very first times that I attended that group, one of the moms in that group said something that has stuck with me to this day. And she said, I attend this group once a month because if I don't tend to my grief, it finds me in unexpected places.
Mm-hmm.
So make time for your grief, whatever that looks like for you, whether that's a walk, whether that's a visit to the cemetery, whether that's a visit to their favorite place. But just making time for your grief, and as often as you need.
I love
We
that.
also put a memorial bench in a park that was across the street from his grandparents' house. And that I know is where my daughter finds her peace. She's not always cemetery, but she goes to the park bench. It's just a place where she can watch other people's kids play, or she can be quiet by herself, or so yeah, just making time for your own grief, because if you don't, it doesn't go away. It finds you, and it still will. There's still times it will get you when you weren't expecting it. But if you're making time for it and you're actively living your grief, um, it's less surprising.
Absolutely. And I like the analogy of whenever there is, I live in Nebraska. And so on the plains, if a storm is coming, but the buffalo turn and walk into the storm instead of trying to run away from it. And it's so true, when you surrender to your grief, it helps you process it. And I would love to tell you that if you ran away from it, you can outrun it, but you can't outrun your grief. It will find you. And so you do have to make time for it. You do have to tend to your feelings. You have to make space in your life to adjust and to process those feelings, because if you just try to tap them down, if you don't process them, they will rear their ugly head when you least expect it in the most inconvenient times. Now, I know, Shelley, you were a working mom. How was it going back to work after his passing?
Well, I honestly never stopped working, so my job did not allow for that. So while Lawson was in the ICU, I was working. 3 days after Lawson passed away, I was working. And then I took very little time off during the funeral. His funeral was the Thursday before Labor Day weekend, and I went back to work on Tuesday. What I found the most challenging was just, I really felt like every day I was just stuffing my emotion down, and eventually that proved to not be okay. It comes out pouring in ways you wouldn't ever want it to. So that was the hardest part about that. I did eventually take some time off and try to regroup, and went back to my job. And so I had been at the same job for 7.5 years. So when Lawson passed away, I'd been there 5 years, and I went back for 2. And ultimately, I have recently left that position, mostly because of that. Like, I need the space to breathe freely, and I've taken some time off before I start my next adventure.
Mhm.
But I think that returning to work is hard, and especially depending upon the people you work with, the coworkers around you, and if they're supportive, if they're absent, and if you have to be in the face of people every day. Like I did have the luxury that there were days I was struggling and I could just shut my door and I could sit in my office and I could cry and I could do my work, and most people were none the wiser, you
Mhm.
know? But
Mhm.
but especially if you have if you have a job that requires you like to be on an assembly line and you have people on both sides of you all day long and the demands are just that the expectation is that you would perform at the normal, it's not going to happen. Like give yourself grace.
Now, what suggestion would you have to an employer who is having someone come back? Because to me, as you're talking about the situation, I mean, I just, after talking to you and reading you, I just know you're such a conscientious and great employee. And I feel like a lot of the reason why you ended up leaving this company was how they handled you when you came back. I'm feeling like they expected you to just not even miss a beat to perform at the level you had performed before and be the same Shelley that you were before.
For sure. So for employers, I would say bereavement leave, I get it. Like, okay, so you get 3 days for a parent, 3 days for a spouse. You know, my employer did 5 days for a child. They did not do 5 days for a child before I lost my child. It was 3 days straight across the board for everybody. Once I had lost a child, I think it probably was one of the first people that they had that had lost a child. They did increase that leave to 5 days, and that's great. You give your employee 5 days paid time off. Do not, as an employer, do not think that your bereavement leave is how long that person is going to grieve. They're not the same thing. That's how long you would like to pay your employee to be off for their making arrangements, attending a funeral, whatever.
Right.
I think that had it been approached differently, if I had had the time, if I had had the freedom to say you take whatever time you need, um, also realize that when the services are over and their final resting is being done, whether that's burial or cremation or whatever the situation is, um, there's still a lot of hard days and they
Mhm.
don't go away. And they might not be any better next year on that day. And they might not be any better 5 years from now on that day. But also, I think there's some fine lines as an employer to
Right.
not be putting it in their face. Like a person's grief and how they've maybe changed or not performed at the same level should never be discussed in an annual review.
I agree.
Also, just not putting in their face that you feel like you've supported them well. Like I feel like I've done everything for you in your grief. So, you know, we're the best. You're never gonna find anybody else like us because we got you through it, you know. Um, yeah, there's a fine line. Obviously, when you're grieving, you want people to show up. You want people to ask you. You want people to remember. But if you don't know the person who passed, or you never did, or you didn't have stories of them before, you're not entitled to them now.
Hmm. Hmm.
So just supporting the employee and what they need, and then not ever throwing it back in their face that you did that for them.
You know, so much of what you have talked about of the different scenarios has been just normal, everyday, kind communication.
For sure.
It's amazing what communication will do. Kind communication, communication where you are willing to ask questions and listen to the answer the person is giving you, not the answer you want them to give you.
I
Listen to
agree.
what people are saying and listen to what they're not saying. There is kind of a side note, but something that's been close to my heart, and I talk a lot about it on my social media, is emotional intelligence. Our country is really lacking in it. And emotional intelligence is a better predictor of how successful you or your child is going to be than IQ actually is. And so, something that you can start doing, everyone out there, is being a kind listener. and listening to what the person is saying and validating them. I'm not saying everyone is right. Everything that when you ask someone a question, I'm not saying what they're saying is right, but it's right from their perspective. So just validate it for them.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think, going back to some of the questions about like what to do, what not to do, um, I think as a society, we really, it's really easy to see somebody, whether it's at the funeral or the day after or before, and you're like, well, if you need anything, give me a call. What I would like society to know is people who are heavily grieving, who need more than you ever could imagine, they don't call anybody. Because in your early grief or even later in grief on hard days, whether it's a birthday, an anniversary, the anniversary of a death, something special to your family, those days, like it's probably when you need somebody the most. But you're lucky if you can get up and shower. You're lucky if you can brush your teeth. So the idea that I'm going to pick up the phone and be like, hey, Christy, like I could use some tacos.
Right.
Not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
We, in that moment, we don't care if we eat. Do we need a meal? Probably. Are we going
Yes.
to ask for one? No.
Yes.
So my advice to anyone who knows somebody who's struggling, whether that's struggling today because it happened yesterday or struggling today because it's the 10-year anniversary, is show up.
I hear that so much. Show up. And don't say, oh, can I come and help you clean? Say, oh, Shelley, I am free this day, this day, this day at these times. Which day can I come over and help you clean? Shelley, I would love to bring you, dinner. And which day works for you? Give some options and let them choose a day. Because
Yeah.
people are not going to ask for help.
Because in that moment, honestly, when you are so lost, you
You don't know
can't
what you
process
need.
that you need help. What you process is it's only noon. It's already 6. Like it just the day. What you're processing, what you're counting is it's been 24 hours since they left. It's been 48 hours they've been gone. It's been today's day 3. This is week 1. I counted every single week. I still do. And there are days that I'll be like, oh, it's been 700 days, and then, but at some point, maybe that goes. And when it does, you don't want someone else bringing it up. Like, oh, I know you're having a bad day because, well, it's the 27th of the month. What do I expect from you? So it's hard. Grief is hard.
And the hardest thing that I have noticed about grief is however many people there are on this earth is how many different ways there are to grieve. But I will tell you the common theme I hear is what Shelley just mentioned was no matter how someone's grieving, show up.
Sit in the awkwardness. Don't think you have to have something to say. If they're not talking, just sit. Just be there.
Yeah. And that is the hardest part, but just be there because nothing you say is going to take their grief away and they don't expect you to. No one expects you to take their grief away.
But sit in the awkwardness.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing anybody could have said in those moments that would have made me feel better. But showing up, being there, showed you cared, period. Whether it was about him, whether you cared about me, whether you cared about my family, just show up.
Now, we're running out of time, so I want to close it down with what is some of the family traditions that you have done to honor Lawson?
We have a lot because we miss him a whole bunch.
I know. I was going to say you have quite the list. So for anyone listening, don't think to do this. The spirits do not expect you. I just want to put this out there before Shelley starts. Spirits don't expect you to always do something to honor them. What you do to honor them is about what makes you feel better. Now, would the spirits step up and say, hey, I've seen this and acknowledge what you've done? Absolutely. They do see what you're doing and they do acknowledge it. But spirit is more about you doing whatever it takes for you to find a sliver of joy, however you can find it.
We have done quite a bit. Like I said, we've done a memorial bench in the park. but we do special things on days that mean a lot to us. So his birthday, we have celebrated his birthday with what a group of people that I call our Lawson people. They're the people who show up. They're the people that we can be around and we can cry if we want to cry and laugh if we want to laugh. Um, so we have 2 annual events, always at least. One is his birthday. We get together. We do a biodegradable balloon release. So we write messages on
Mentioned
them.
that, didn't he? I forgot about
Yeah,
that. He mentioned that
yeah.
here.
So we write messages on them and we let them go. And then we have marked Thanksgiving as a time of thanks, right? It's a time to be thankful. And so the Saturday after Thanksgiving, our group gathers. We call it the Heart of Lawson dinner, because we all bring our memories and share our grief and our happiness and our memories. We gather, we eat, we play games, we have kind of a holiday party, if you will, because Lawson loved every holiday, and it's the kickoff to the holiday season. There's been 2 years now, and we're going into our third. I have ordered ornaments. The first year they were heartbeat ornaments from actually Lawson's heartbeat that they gave us at the hospital. And the second year I did ornaments. I'm like, how many years can I expect people to put my kid's name on their Christmas tree? So this last year, I took Legos. Lawson loved Legos. And so I bought Lego ornaments and put their names on them instead of my kid's name on them. But everybody knew exactly what it was about. So we've done that. And then every year at the holidays, we adopt a family in Lawson's name. So, and when I say adopt a family, I'm not talking about like just like a adopt a family off the tree, like that we find a family in our community. One of Lawson's teachers is part of that group. He was a special ed teacher that came to the house. He was homebound. And he helps us find a family with another special needs child who might be financially challenged at the holidays, or maybe they're facing some other sort of crisis. And we shop for them, and we put together holiday games and goodies and food. And we really just blessed their holiday season in Lawson's name, because Lawson loved the holidays. So we have done things from decorating our SUV with lights and music, and having Santa jump out the back end with a sack of gifts for a family, to really just blessing them financially and letting them use the money where they need it, or help them pay for a stay at the Ronald McDonald House, or provide groceries for while the kids are off holiday break. So yeah, so those are kind of our standard ones. And then the other thing I do is when I go to the store, like let's say I'm in Michael's craft store, and they always have at this time of year, and the holidays, they either have the haunted house stuff, like you can build a haunted house out of like the Oreo cookie things,
Right.
or that was something Lawson absolutely loved, absolutely loved. So I will go and I'll buy, whether it's 2 kids or whoever I decide in my circle of people that has kids that would love it, and I will buy them, or like the Rice Krispie trains at Christmas, or gingerbread houses, and I bless a family. I throw a Heart of Lawson sticker on it. I've developed my own logo for this. Hopefully someday gonna be an organization, but right now it's just how we gift things in his name. We do that. We'll give Heart of Lawson gifts at Christmas or birthday. It's not guaranteed, but if while I'm shopping for my daughter's birthday present, I see something that I go, oh my gosh, that's totally something he would have given her, I bring it home, I wrap it in pure red paper, the color of his heart, and I throw a Heart of Lawson gift on it, gift tag on it, and he's still giving gifts in his name, something that would be inspired by him. It's not just a random gift. It has to hit me as like, oh, that's something that he would have given this person. And so he lives
Absolutely.
on in our heart and our homes that way
I also
by
love,
giving it.
I think my favorite is how y'all bless a family in his name, because that is so his heart. Like, just, I know I didn't know Lawson on this earth, but reading him from the other side, he loved to make people laugh. Just the way
For
he
sure.
always presents to me, I can tell he just loved to make people laugh. He loves to see people stepping out in joy. And so that is such a perfect representation of Lawson, is to then bless a family and make them joyful. So I would say anyone that is looking for a way to remember their loved one, think about their personality and what made them happy.
For sure.
Lawson loved to make people happy when he was on this earth. So the fact that you bless a whole family and make them happy is such a perfect way to honor him. Thank you, Shelley, for being here. I know this is a tough subject to talk about, but I so appreciate you showing up and letting us see a little bit of your journey. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. It is really nice just to be able to talk about the things that I have learned along the way. I'm by no means an expert, but unfortunately I'm experienced in the topic.
Yes, and I thank you for being here, but I'm also sorry that you are experienced on this topic.
Thanks,
I
Christy.
want to thank everyone for listening today. And if y'all have any questions or concerns, please email me at christygodwin111@gmail.com. Thank y'all so much.